he hasn't in any way been
These
pressuring
are
us.
subjects that have all
We've been holding him back.
discussed,
He's
right?
been,
Yep.
okay. Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting and public hearing for Tuesday, October 13th, 2015. If so, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Batanti.
Here.
Mr. Brado.
Here.
Mr. Caprell.
Here.
Mr. Tominello.
Here.
Mr. York.
Here.
Mr. Witt, here. Mr. Verkowski.
Here. Next on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting minutes of September 28, 2015, workshop minutes of September 29, 2015, and workshop minutes of October 5, 2015, and approval of the bills in the amount of $609,373.66.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
All right.
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Tominello. Any discussion? Hearing none and no public comment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is the approval of the regular agenda. Board members, we did have an emergency addendum from the assessing department. I'd propose that we add that as item G3.
Make a
Otherwise-
motion to approve the regular agenda with the change.
All right, is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Batanti, with a motion by Mr. York. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next is announcements. First of all, I'll welcome everybody to the meeting. We have an above-average crowd this evening. I know there's a few items on the agenda that are generating some public interest, so I'll let everyone know that as a part of our meeting, we have two chairs up front near the podium, and those chairs are labeled, those are our on-deck chairs. So when the board makes a motion, before we vote on any motion, we open up the floor for public comment. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And to help us know when someone may be ready to comment on an agenda item, we ask you to come up to the on-deck chair so that in the interest of keeping the meeting moving and giving everyone a chance to speak, if someone's speaking and you'd like to speak next, please come up to the chair so that when they're done, there's a chance for them to speak. We'll take all the public comments on an item. When there's no more, then we'll close the floor, and then the board can engage in discussion and take action by way of a vote. At the end of the meeting, we'll open the floor to public comment, which can be about any subject, and that's 5 minutes in length, and it isn't limited to the item. But say, for example, if we're voting on item C1, we limit the comments to that item, to the item that we're voting on. So if you're here to talk about item D, we'd ask that you wait to comment until we're talking about D, to give your public comments. I know there were some folks that had some concerns and questions about items D1 and D2. Those were the special assessment districts for the bridge. I've said so, and I'll be proposing that this board table those items, but we will do so in the form of a motion so that anybody who's here that wishes to publicly comment or address the board on those items will have the opportunity to do so. So we're not removing it from the agenda. By doing so, we wouldn't be opening up the floor for public comment. So otherwise, announcements. State Representative Anthony Forlini will be hosting a Community Shred Day on this Friday, October 16th, from 9 until 11 a.m. at the Harrison Township Senior Center. This is one way to avoid identity theft and dispose of all of your old documents safely. Shredding is free for up to 2 standard bags or boxes per person. If you need more information, you can contact Representative Forlini at 888-DIST-024 or Anthony Forlini at house.mi.gov. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary Flotilla 20-09 will be conducting a boating safety class on Saturday, October 24th, 2015. at 44327 Macomb Industrial Drive, Clinton Township, Michigan, from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. Participants will receive training, and upon successful completion of the class, will receive a voting safety card and certificate from the Coast Guard. The cost is $35 per person, which includes lunch. For more information, please contact the Public Education Staff Officer, Matt Eineman, 586-822-2799, or mshineman@aol.com. Hallowpalooza will be held on Saturday, October 24th, from 5 to 7 p.m. at Tucker Park. Trunk or treating begins at 6 p.m. The event is sponsored by the Harrison Township's Park and Recreation Committee. And for more information, you can contact trustee Frank Capral at 586-466-1400, extension 1550, or at his email address, fcapral, K-A-P-R-A-L, at harrison-township.org. Harrison Township's Veterans Memorial Program will be held on Saturday, November 7th at 1 p.m. Please join us right here outside of our boardroom to honor our community veterans. The event will be held rain or shine. In fact, a majority of the program will actually be held inside the building. It's one time of the year when we add names of any residents who have served in the military and wish to be added to our veterans list. And if that happens to affect you and you haven't been added and like to, you can contact the supervisor's office and we can add you to the program next year. For all of the events that I mentioned and some others, you can certainly call the supervisor's office for more information at 466-1445, or visit the township website where there's information and links for all these events, harrison-township.org. I mentioned the trunk or treating. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to mention, or?
I guess the only other thing to add to that is it is a completely free event, so we'd like to have all the young kids come out and their families and have a good time.
All right, great. Okay, any other announcements?
Mr. Supervisor, there are some empty seats in here. I see some folks standing in the back. So.
Yep, there's some chairs off here to our left and one up front here. Okay, next on our agenda is item B, accept the donation of 2 parcels of land in the Ballard Estates from the estate of Mr. Robert Ballard. Board members, the estate of Mr. Robert Ballard has offered to donate 2 parcels of land to Harrison Township. These 2 parcels are located near the end of Ballard Road, and they back up to the spillway property. I have had discussions with the Beautification Commission, along with the property owners on each side of the 2 parcels. The plan would be to develop these lots into a nursery for our Beautification Commission, including a possible community garden. The location near the spillway also makes them useful in the event there is a need for limited access to the park along the spillway, including the bike path and for repairs and maintenance. I recommend that we accept the donation of these 2 parcels from the estate of Mr. Robert Ballard. I believe we have a representative from the estate here, so if it's okay with the board, we'll hear from him.
We do, Mr. Supervisor, and I have copies of the plats in case the other trustees want to take a look at the exact location of these 2 parcels. I'm here on the behalf of the family of Robert Ballard, longtime resident who passed away in January 20th of 2015 this year at the age of 91. Lifelong resident of Harrison Township and a lifelong fixture in the community. World War II veteran and a longtime member of the township's historical commission. The family kind of got together and decided on behalf of the Robert Ballard Trust and other interested parties in the family that this would be a way to honor the family on Ballard Street and to continue the family legacy there, and felt strongly that these 2 parcels would make a nice addition along the spillway with the very things that you just mentioned. And perhaps it could be known as something along the lines of if we're naming it something along the lines of the Ballard Access or Ballard Park or something along those lines. I've had discussions on the legalities of completing this transaction with the township attorney, Mr. Huth, and we will have no problem in completing this transaction, and I think it will be a nice benefit for the township. And members of the family are here tonight, the extended family and the two trustees, Wesley Ballard and June Hill, are here tonight as well.
All right. Well, thank you. I know that I also had conversations with Mr. Huth. There was some discussion about the fact that these are currently residential lots, and the board may enter into some agreement that in the event that they wanted to sell them, that we wouldn't sell them for profit. We would return those lots to the family or any proceeds. So the intent isn't to acquire these lots and sell them. And as much as we acknowledge that we might certainly, I've talked with the family that it would be seemingly befitting to acknowledge the family history and the family farm, and we might refer to them as park lots or some sort of a park. The intent isn't to develop these lots in a way that we might traditionally perceive a park. In other words, not very far from these two lots is an existing park, Tucker Park, which is a public access park. And because these two lots are certainly a generous donation to the township, but they're not large enough to make a substantial park, and in essence, they would be kind of nestled in a residential community. So I want to make sure that the board understands and anyone present understands that we certainly wouldn't intend to use them in a traditional park-like use, but rather a garden and maybe some way to commemorate the farming history of the family and their contributions to both the hospital as well as the spillway and their life going back, I think it was a couple hundred years. They suggested
Close.
certainly a long time.
Close to that, yeah,
Right.
certainly over 150 that we know
Right.
of, yeah.
Right, so,
And I should have introduced myself. I'm John MacArthur. I'm an attorney in Mount Clemens, and
okay.
I'm
right.
sorry to overlook that.
Does the board have any questions for the attorney or the family, or?
So I wanted to say, I think that's a very generous donation, and I'm sure that the beautification committee is looking forward to having a place to plant their flowers, and get them sprouted, and move them around the township. Sure.
Yeah, and as nice as a gift as these are, the nicest gift that I've ever gotten from him was some of the stories that he shared with me in his role on the historical commission.
Yes,
It was a
absolutely.
pleasure to get to meet him and get to know him while I worked here, so.
Yep, and certainly he was blessed with his wits until the last time that I'd seen him. He was a pretty witty and funny fella, and this is a good way to remember him, so. If there's no other comments, is there a motion this evening?
I'll make a motion to accept the donation of 2 parcels of property located in Ballard Estates, lots 2 and 3, subject to the satisfactory approval of title work regarding these parcels and transfer documents completed by the township attorney.
All right, is there support? Support. All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Capral. Is there any discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board, and thank you.
Thank you.
To you, but also to
Thank
the
you.
family for the generous donation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, family, yes.
I don't think so. It might have come from that end. You know what, probably because it's highlighted, it may have come from the attorney. Okay, next on our agenda is item C1, Special Assessment District for Cherry Lane, Church Street, Bakeman Street, and Mast Court for road improvements. Mr. Witt?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. At our September 28th, 2015 meeting, resolution number 2 was adopted, which set the date for,
Yeah, the microphone seemed quiet. I don't know
Could
if,
you turn the PA up a little bit, Wally?
I noticed that as well.
Is that better? Testing, testing. Is that better? Is that better? Thanks, Wally.
yep. As I was saying, we had set the date for tonight for our public hearing of necessity for this project. It's also known as the first public hearing. We publish a notice in the Macomb Daily and in the Journal. We also sent notice to each titled owner or party of interest in the property to be assessed, whose name appeared on the tax records, to let them know about the meeting. The purpose of the hearing is for individuals to speak for or against the project as it's presented. This is an individual's opportunity to go on the record as being against the project. Speaking against the project allows them to further on appeal the assessment at the state tax tribunal. So the process would be to open the floor for the public hearing, open it to the residents that are affected, and then close the public hearing.
All right. So item C1 is specifically to conduct the public hearing.
Correct.
Make a motion to open the first public hearing at, I don't know what time, clock's
7:16.
7:16.
Is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Batanti to open the first public hearing regarding this special assessment at 7:16 PM. Discussion? All right, seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Witt? Yes. Mr. Verkest?
Yes. And then as a point of clarification, there are, again, there are two special assessment district items on the agenda. This one in particular is Cherry Lane, Church Street, and Bakeman Street, and Mass Court, a section of private roads. So we'll open the floor for public comment now.
Yes, hello, Board and folks in the audience. First, appreciate the Board, the Township's efforts at these kinds of improvements. These
And,
can be
and I'm sorry,
challenging.
I don't want to interrupt you, but if you could identify yourself for the record, because it is a public
Certainly
hearing.
can.
We have to
Certainly can.
identify your name and your property that you're speaking to.
Sure. Lawrence Risley, it's 37655 Mass Court.
Thank you.
So shorten the compliments. So moving on to the formal end of the business. So just a formal objection in the assessment such that it's including Mass Court basis is that the Mass Court is 15-foot wide with a 3-foot easement. Not a very level surface. Water drainage is a bit of a problem. The road has been reasonably well maintained other than the levelness, if you will, of the road. So it would be an objection just specifically for Mass Court in the inclusion. And then in terms of placement, if I recall correctly, my understanding was a 16-foot wide paving of Mass Court. Would object to that only on the basis that the road is actually deeded as 15-foot wide with a 3-foot easement. So just suggesting that the appropriate is the paving, if it moves forward, of 15-foot. Second is different property representation. So for Church Group Limited, as a representative of Lot 15, which is commonly referred to as the Church Road itself, which is a 30-foot wide road, 30-foot wide lot by 395 foot. And just a bit of a lack of clarity. I got two different things in terms of the assessment that Church Group Limited would be assessed. The fee for the paving didn't seem appropriate, so I'll just enter an objection for the assessment to the Church Road. Pending some other discussions, it may very well be that indeed is not included as a party to payment of the road. So based on purely the owner of that property and looking at the properties which would be called Mass Court, Bakeman, and Church, I think at this point aren't included in terms of being assessed, if you will, just a property that exists. So I just want to be clear on the objection. It has to do with the assessment charge to the Church Group Limited. Point of clarification and requirement is the Church Road lot is 30-foot wide. If I'm not mistaken, it was proposed at 20-foot paving. Then that would need to be centered within that 30-foot road. Reason for that is that there, again, is no drainage my understanding there's no drainage provisions in this proposal that's being set forward. But in centering that 20-foot blacktop coating, that would enable a 5-foot on each side of the existing lot, such that additional improvements such as drainage, culvert, those kinds of things could be easily put in. And then the last objection would be in terms of paving of the, this particular lot, referred to as Church Group, would potentially increase the liability associated with that particular lot, specifically based on the higher speeds that could be anticipated and a concern for the canal in that area. And that liability should be something that would be shared by the benefiting homeowners. In this case, my suggestion would be those that legally have egress access. So that would complete my concerns that I just wanted to voice to the board here. Are there any questions?
Typically, what we do is during a public hearing, we'll accept public comment, after which we'll close the floor for public comment, and we typically don't engage in a back and forth with the
Fair
public.
enough. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Name is Michael Risley, and talk and discuss Lot 7 in the Reese sub. Wanted to formally object to the paving of Mass due to the unevenness. Every house on that road is at a different level, therefore the road indicates that. It has a lot of slopes in it and would be slip and fall risk in a lot of places if it was smoother like asphalt will be. Also, the drainage will be an issue. I believe that's all I have for that. Go on the record against it.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Jane Ann Schaefer. I live on Bakeman, I'm not sure what the lot number is. My concerns with this entire project is those roads have a lot more problems than a little bit of slap and black top on is gonna save. I think we're gonna do a lot of work and spend a lot of money, and we're gonna end up with the same problems because of the underlying issues that are there. As my predecessors up here have pointed out, we've got unevenness, we've got flooding, we've got some real problems with that road. And to put a Band-Aid on there at this price just doesn't make any sense. I also want to point out that there is another quote that is out there that would be 1/3 of the cost, and I have brought copies if anybody wants to see it. So I think we have alternatives here besides what's, in my opinion, being rammed down our throats. And I think we need to take a look at this and do something more than just create an issue that's gonna get worse. The blacktop's gonna crumble, and we'll have that mess on top of everything else. So I think this is not well thought out, and I think we need to give it more time.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment for the Cherry Lane, Bakeman, Church Road, and Mast Road Special Assessment District? Anyone?
I would like to say something, if you don't mind.
No, and what I'd ask, sir, is if you could, bring that microphone around. I don't know how well people behind everyone can hear.
My name is Joe Abdenor, and I own property on Cherry Lane and Wall Street. And I submitted a proposal to our residents in the subdivision regarding paving the street with chip seal. And I have not received at my residence the detail of what everybody else seems to have received with regard to costs and everything in the financing of the project that you're the subject of this meeting. I submitted a quotation to have the road chip seal from Jefferson to all the streets along the water, all the way down Cherry Lane, including Bateman and the branch streets at Bateman. And I think the quote was $125,000 for the chip seal itself. And it didn't include preparations for the land. And I didn't receive any financial information as to what proposal was made for Cherry Lane. And I don't know how many other people were unaware of or are unaware of the financial aspects of the proposal. And I want to say that the project has not been adequately, we have not been adequately advised of the project. At least I haven't been, and I don't know how many others in our subdivision have also not been advised of the financial aspects. I think it should be paved, but it should be paved at a reasonable rate. And I think the rate that I proposed by a company that happens to be owned by members of my family, it worked out to $1,200 per 50-foot lot on Cherry Lane. That did not include the preparation of that included only the laying and of the chip seal. And there would be other aspects that we would have to do to prepare the road to receive the chip seal in the proper fashion. So I have no idea of what finances are involved in the proposal that was set forth as the subject of this meeting. And I just got here and I'm unaware of, those financial, that financial information. I think it should be more clearly set forth and made available to everybody. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
William Bardell. I don't live in the immediate area, but when I heard the proposal with 2.5 inches of 21 AA under the 2 inches or whatever blacktop, I just about fell and hit my head on the ground. If you got 2.5 inches, the reason you put 21 AA, let me tell you why you put 21 AA under. If any water does get underneath the road or there's a crack in the asphalt, concrete, whatever it will be, the 21 AA holds the structure until the rain or the water underneath the road can slowly dissipate while holding the integrity of the structure. That's why you need 4 inches of 21 AA. If you put 2.5 inches of 21 AA, you're wasting your money. And also, I don't know why it doesn't go by the foot. So, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mohsen Kambod. I live at 37800 Bakeman. I've been the resident since 1993. Just give you a little bit of history about the Cherry Lane and Bakeman area. This used to be managed by Macomb County Commissioner, Road Commissioner, where they did grade the entire street all the way up to Mass and Church and Bakeman. But as a result of the public hearing, this was stopped a few years ago, and therefore maintaining the road stop at the private section of the Cherry Lane, which is the Wall Street. After this event, all the residents that were living past the Wall Street end up with the dilemma of driving through this road with a lot of difficulty. And the reason for this, nobody was participating to come together and come up with a solution. After a year and a half, after 6 months, we had a new resident who moved in and built up a new house at the end of Church Street, and he happened to be a construction company. He was nice enough to come in and grade the road at least for a year and a half. But this was resulted in big expenses for one individual to come in every so often to do this. So we said this is not fair, and this is not going to be the ultimate solution to this road. We need to get together with all residents, come up with the final resolution for this. As a result, residents got together. We went in. We got over 51% of vote to go for paving the road. But the problem that we had to get a good code and get it exact information that we need as what needs to be done for this road was lack of engineering design. There is no construction or no road can be paved without doing the initial engineering design. This engineering design has to be done by the specialists who understand drainage system. They do topographic drawing and figure out what exactly needs to be done and how it needs to be done in order to do it right. And we needed $7,500 for this project to be completed. Unfortunately, we didn't come up with that money. We said, why don't we all go vote for it? Once we get that project approved, the money comes in, the first $7,500 of this project will go for the engineering design. If our road is no different than any other roads in Macomb County. Actually, ours is a little bit better because we have the free drainage in Beekman and Cherry Lane, because Metro Parkway would be on east side of the Cherry Lane, has a ditch that has for the storm drainage, which is a deep ditch, which when I talked to the engineers who came in to give us a quote for the design, they said that we'd be able to design this somehow that most of the drainage goes to the ditch and be able to use some sort of gravel on the side that will absorb the drainage on the right side. Not to make the long story short, basically, we have more than 51% of the vote for this project to go forward. And we wanted to do it right, and based on the people we spoke with, they're gonna maintain this. In other words, they are warranting the job for the next 10 years with a very minimum maintenance fee if the project ever goes forward. If we do not do this, I can tell you that people who live in this area will not be able to go home safely. There is a health hazard associated with this road. We get in dust and dirt in our houses. We're sniffing this on a daily basis. This is a particular matter which is cause a lot of chronic problem in the long term. And if we do not do something about this road, it would be unsafe and would be non-livable to live on those areas. So that's why we want to get this project completed. We want to get it done right. We want to get it engineered right. We want to do it the way it's supposed to be done. I agree with the gentleman who said we just went with ideas. We have not done the initial work, which is engineering design, to get this project. And once we get that engineering design completed, we can get a final quotes and final price for this, because what we have put as together this is a worst case scenario for that price. We believe once the engineering design is done, we'll be able to get a better competitive pricing and be able to get the prices lower than what is proposed right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Ott. I purchased a home on Cherry Lane about a month ago. I don't know a whole lot about the project, but whether I'm for it or against it, don't know yet. Don't even know what it's about. My big concern is just the finances, and it seems like it's an awful lot of money. I'm not sure how it gets paid. I mean, is it through your taxes? Is it up front? Definitely think the road's the problem. But with just purchasing a home, putting a lot of money into it, you know, I don't know if that price is reasonable. I mean, that's really my only concern. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other public comments? Okay. Again, I'll remind folks, if you do have a public comment, so that we can get as many folks up as possible. If there's someone else here that would like to comment publicly, we'd invite you to come to the on-deck chair so that when one speaker is finished, next one can come up and everyone can have a chance to be heard, and we get to go home at a reasonable hour. So, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Donald Clay, and I have a vacant lot on Church Road. I've owned property on either Mass Court or Church Road for the last 13 or 14 years. in the years that I've lived out there and have owned property out there, I've put hundreds of dollars into the roads myself, and I've seen very few other people come forth and participate in maintaining the roads. And I think this is an opportunity for democracy to happen. That's what this is all about. The majority of the people have voted by putting their signature on this project to improve the roads, and it will benefit everybody. And it won't be down to just a few people, like the resident that they talked about had his own equipment come out and grade the roads, and people like me who had truckloads of rock come out and put into the road over the years. And I'd like to see this move forward. This is a democracy that people have voted by putting their signature on this petition, and I think we should move forward with it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Anderson at 37720 Bakeman. I have to also endorse this project. We've gone through this. I've been a member of the community for 5.5 years now. During my time there, we've had one private owner who's been generous enough to clear the area. We have not been able to come to a general consensus about this. We've come to you and gone through the process, and I think at this time, due to transfer of ownership, due to the reality that those of us in the neighborhood literally cannot pass down the street. I mean, if we want to promote a positive image of Harrison Township, I should be able to have people to my home. And the only way that that's going to happen is if we all band together and do something about the road. In 5.5 years, that's not happened. We're not asking for the township to do it, we're just asking to come together as a neighborhood. High traffic areas, certain people have had more traffic than others, and I think that that's become kind of an issue. They don't want to pay the price of multiple ownership. We have engineers, everybody's on board, and I think if we choose an alternative, or if we don't agree to this, the only alternative is that this will not pass. Bottom line, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Well, we ask that you comment one time, Miss.
I can't have a second.
No. So seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, and we'll move back to a board comment. To the extent that we can, I've written down a few questions, and I don't know if between you or I, we can answer that. I know one of the questions, one resident said that he was unaware of the financial information, so what's the process that is distributed, or maybe you can share that?
When they go, because this is a community-driven process, the township doesn't distribute information. We give the information to the petitioners, and they go through and they have a responsibility to go door to door, and they talk to those people and sell the project, essentially. We've also had informal meetings here at the township offices where we invite people to come and hear about the project. The information is available in the clerk's office. That was part of the notice, is that we have the information at the clerk's office for review.
And then also, once the SAD is approved, there is a public noticing process by which we then, once we say, okay, we've received a majority of signatures, now we go through a noticing process?
Correct. We sent out, it was noticed in the paper twice. We sent out first-class mail to all the property owners for this public hearing, and then we do that again for our second public hearing. Part of tonight, once we close this, is the resolutions that we adopt tonight. The first one would direct the township to prepare the roll for approval. And the second resolution that we adopt tonight is to set another public hearing on the role specific, where again, you'd have an opportunity to come and speak to whether that assessment was accurately made or not. And again, that goes through a notice process where we put it in the paper twice, we mail out to people. So the law establishes an overabundance of notice, just to make sure that nobody accidentally misses something. We try and, maybe I don't open my mail, but, I read the journal every day, every time it comes in the week, so we try and cover our bases on a couple different methods, so.
Okay.
Might not be a bad idea if the petitioners send something, especially if it's gonna require financial information, send it certified mail to the rest of the people in that community, so at least they know that it went out. And if you sign for it, you got the financial information that you're ultimately gonna be paying for,
Yep.
so.
Okay. Another question was, how is it paid via taxes? Perhaps you can share
Sure.
a little bit about that.
What happens is once the project's closed out, we receive a final cost. And again, these are estimated.
Closed out meaning completed. The
Completed.
work is done.
Work is done, everything's approved. We receive a final cost, based on the assessment that was established before. We then, put that out there to residents. We essentially bill you. We give you an opportunity to pay that, as a lump sum up front with no interest. The treasurer's office will send out, a bill, for the amount. If the amount is less than this amount, you only bill the lesser amount. If it's over, based on the amount of over, as we go through the process, that gets billed out as well. But you're only billed what the project cost actually is. And then in terms of this project, what we had originally, I believe, estimated it as was a 5-year payback. If you wanted to let it go, it'll go on your taxes, and then it's has interest against it based on there's a formula established that allows us to set it at a certain level, but usually we estimate around 5% for borrowing costs.
So when the project's done, right now, the anticipation is a cost of, the estimate is $5,700 and $5,713 per lot. The final cost is what the actual cost will be.
Correct.
At the time the project is complete, residents can pay that amount in full, or they can pay it over what's a reasonable expectation of the life of that project. In this case, it's been estimated to be 5 years. You don't want to finance for 20 years something that's only expected to last 8 years. So 5 was given as a reasonable estimate.
Yeah, and that's something this board can determine as well, as far as the level,
The number of years.
the number of years and the interest rate. That's ultimately our decision when we set that at our next, after our next public hearing.
Okay. All right, and then there was also a question about the decision, and some discussion from some residents regarding the decision for the number of inches, or basically the dimension of the base, as well as the tack, and the dimension or the thickness of the asphalt. That isn't a number that was determined by the Board of Trustees, is that correct?
Correct. The normal process that we work with on a public road is the Department of Roads says, here's our standard, here's what you do. This isn't a public road. So the homeowners who were sort of spearheading the project went out on their own, chased a bunch of companies to try and get professional estimates from companies. And the names that they worked with weren't, Joe's Asphalt Company. They were names that you see doing business, with other municipalities and that kind of thing.
Yeah, they do county work.
They do county work, absolutely. So they went out, took a look at the project. They also contracted with a not contracted, but worked with a public engineer. And I've spoke with them a couple times as far as doing some basic engineering work to make sure they're not putting asphalt down in a way that's gonna fail immediately or anything like that, so.
But it isn't, but the thickness isn't the standard that the county would require for a
Correct,
public road.
yeah,
It's
well,
less than that.
If we, as I spoke at last meeting, the township normally would require a private road that's gonna pave itself to put in cement curb and gutter and then asphalt in the middle and have it be up to county standards. You couldn't do a county standard road in that subdivision because of the unique way that it's laid out. In going through and looking at plats and that kind of stuff, there's documentation that speaks to times when this was, before Michigan was a state, before Michigan was part of the United States, as far as where deeds were granted for this property out here. So, you try and do your best out there and fit within a project so it's reasonable for the people and it's what the people want. Again, I think one of the residents said it well, it's a democratic process. We're not deciding for them, it's their decision.
Right, and I think that's an important point. The township didn't decide the level of work that should occur on the road, whether that be the thickness or the style of paving. The only thing that we have is through that process, if a majority of residents want to do it, the only reason that the township is ultimately involved is because the state of Michigan said through the special assessment district process, if a majority of people want the work, they basically put the pressure or the responsibility on the township to act as a fiduciary, to make sure that people pay their portion because we have the ability to collect taxes. So that's really our only role in the process. I realize we were remiss in not closing the public hearing. Normally, we don't by a vote or resolution, but I think it would be appropriate. We've responded the best we can to have a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing at 7:45.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello to close the first public hearing at 7:45 PM. Yep, so I'll try to address that question, although and try not to engage too much. But literally, part of the process by law, when we have a special assessment district, is we have to conduct a public hearing. So we post that, we notify folks, that's what we've had so far. So we accepted as much public comment. I'd asked several times if anyone had any public comment, and at some point, we literally close this public hearing. So we're making, taking a vote to officially close that public hearing on this issue. There will be further actions that we have to take to adopt the resolution that would make the SAD move forward. And if we do that, we certainly accept public comment then. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello to close the public hearing at 7:45 PM. All those in favor?
No,
sign-
roll call.
Oh, that's right. Yep, sorry. Yep, roll call vote.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Caprell?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Verkast?
Yes. All right, next on our agenda is item C2. Actually, C2 and C3, but they are two separate actions. The adoption of Resolution 3. Mr. Witt?
Yes, Board. As I spoke to earlier, Resolution number 3 directs us to create the actual special assessment role, which will begin the process after this meeting. We then make that role available to the public for review, so people can say, I'm at 37555, and look and say, well, here's how much I'll owe, and that's available we'd make that available in our office. So that's what this resolution number 3 does. And I'll just quickly speak to resolution number 4. That would set the second public hearing for this project. Because we're on a Tuesday, it can't be at our next meeting because of the notification requirements. We have to have it in the paper at least 10 days prior for the first notice in the paper. Because of the time frame with a Tuesday meeting, we weren't able to meet that. So we would be setting for our second public hearing, which is for individuals to speak to that assessment role that we prepare for Monday, November 9th at 7 o'clock.
So that's the second one, or Resolution number 4.
That's resolution number 4.
So Resolution number 3 adopts the role.
No, directs the clerk's office to prepare the role.
Okay, and then number 4 calls for the second public hearing.
Correct.
But the public hearing, and that public hearing is specifically on the role.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Discussion, board members, or a motion?
Make a motion to adopt the foregoing resolution number 3 for Cherry Lane, Church Street, Bakeman Street, and Mass Court for road improvement SAD project as presented.
All right, is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Brado? All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Brado to adopt resolution number 3 for Cherry Lane, Church Street, Bakeman Street, and Mast Court Road Improvement Special Assessment District Project as presented. Discussion, board members? Hearing none, I'll open up the floor for public comment.
William Bardell, I just want to say, so you're saying that our township engineer approved 2.5 inch of base, and these residents are paying for a road that is expected to last 5 years? Don't seem right to me. Our township engineer, that I don't know how much you pay him, we pay him good, approved 2.5 inches of base. You can't make that another 1.5 inches and make it 4. I don't know. 5-year road, $5,000 each, $5,700, and you're not going by the foot. Don't seem right.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment.
Mr. Supervisor, just to clarify on the resident, just so I'd like to respond to his question on the asphalt. Actually, in the proposal, it's exactly what he asked for. There is an additional 1.5 inches of asphalt under the 2.5 that serves as a leveling base. The proposal also includes the estimate includes including the limestone underneath as a leveling course. And again, it's based on the road conditions. There's an existing road out there, so when the engineer goes out there, he's gonna make an evaluation of the current condition of the road, and direct the project to include that limestone additional base as needed.
Right.
So again, it's exactly what that gentleman spoke to. There is an additional 1.5 inches, so if we add those together, we got the 4 inches.
Well, there is a crushing of the existing road surface.
They're
a
gonna
crushing and leveling.
mill and level that, you know,
Right.
basically.
Right, but a point of a clarification, I don't believe our township engineer approved this project. We're not doing the engineering here.
Correct.
Right?
The engineering is gonna be through a private consultant.
And again, just at the risk of being redundant, the township hasn't decided on the thickness of any of this. It's a private road, and I have no more business telling these folks whether they should have a concrete road or an asphalt road than I have to tell them whether they should plant a certain kind of flower or use a certain color of vinyl siding. This is a private road, it's not our matter. As far as the duration, what the contractors indicated is they're offering for an additional smaller fee, the one resident mentioned, a 10-year maintenance project, so presumably the contractor's implying that if the residents include in their assessment the cost to perform the maintenance, they're saying that they'll maintain that road for 10 years. So I think it's reasonable to say that the contractor, by offering a 10-year warranty and accepting money for it, is agreeing to come out and maintain that road over a 10-year period. So township engineer did not design or approve the road. The residents made that decision themselves. And based on the project as they've presented it, the contractor's suggesting a 10-year warranty. So kind of a couple answers for the resident. Any other discussion?
Just a question, refresh my memory, but I thought the warranty was included in that price?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and just to sort of follow up about the township engineer's role, he will, because the township is the one that actually ends up signing these contracts for the project, and because we act as the fiduciary, we actually act as the contract holder for the project. So the engineer would be involved to be our representative to make sure, you know, I'm not an engineer, so when an engineer comes in and tells me something, I'm gonna turn to the township engineer and say, hey, is he blowing smoke or is he telling the truth? And so, you know, we wanna make sure that the township represents the residents in ensuring the project is completed to both what they asked for and.
What the contract states.
Yeah, what the contract
Right.
states.
And the cost, and again, for clarification for residents, the cost for that work, for that effort on the part of the engineer is included. So it's not being borne by the general fund or the general population, but rather for this
We
project.
included administration cost that covers that.
Correct. Any other discussion? We close the floor for public comment. We will have another one, but when we make a motion, I'll open the floor for public comment and close the floor. I'm sorry. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Brado to adopt the foregoing resolution number 3 for Cherry Lane, Church Street, Bakeman Street, and Mast Court Road improvements, Special Assessment District project as presented. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Tominelli?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Verkest?
Yes. Next on our agenda is item C3 regarding the public hearing. I know you spoke to it, but Mr. Witt, just a point of clarification.
Just again, yeah, this sets the public hearing for comment on the special assessment roll for our November 9th meeting at 7 o'clock.
All right. A discussion or a motion?
So moved, Mr.
All right.
Supervisor.
Got a motion by Mr. Tominello, with support by Mr. York to adopt resolution number 4, which again, in essence, was holding the public hearing on the roll. Yep. So now is the time, if anybody wishes to comment, we invite you to sit on the
Who's
on
gonna hold
deck
the
chair.
bond on this?
Hold on.
Right.
Okay. If you wish to comment publicly, we have 2 chairs there. We invite you to come up, sit in the chair. We'll open the floor for public comment. If nobody's sitting there, there's no way for me to know if anybody wants to comment, so that's why we encourage you to come up once we make a motion. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, we're supposed to have 10-year guarantee on this. Who's gonna hold the bond to make sure this company doesn't go out of business before the 10 years are up?
have any other questions? We'll answer those, but we don't engage in a back and forth conversation.
Oh, okay. And the other issue is I really take umbrage to the fact that they're dividing this by lots. I'm doing the best I can with what I got to work with, and I have a real problem with paying for somebody who can afford their area better than I can, and that's just not right. I think we should pay for what is our portion, and just like you do your break wall, nobody kicks in to keep your break wall going, you pay for your own. And we should do the same thing with the road. Pay for your own frontage, and don't be leaning on other people to get done what you want to get done.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. There was a question about whether or not or a comment stated about whether or not this should be divided by lot or by footage. Again, can you speak to how that decision is made? Is that a board decision or is that a resident decision?
That decision is, it's driven by the residents. When we held the informal public hearing is when you get a lot of that information out. You have a lot of again, it's called an informal hearing because there's a lot of informal discussion. This is a smaller group, and it allowed for some pretty extended conversation that evening, and the general consensus and what they went around with petitions that people signed on was on a per lot basis. So that was their decision.
Okay. And then the second question was regarding the warranty and maintenance. Looking at the proposal as it's stated, there's a note, it says, except as specifically noted above, no allowance has been made for bonds. So as I'm reading this, as the proposal was submitted, there is no bonding for this warranty. And that's something that if the project is approved and moves forward, that the township, engineer can have a discussion on. But at this point, the proposal and the costs that are associated with this do not appear to include any bond for that warranty performance.
And
Well,
again,
what you can do,
and again, what we had talked about was the possibility of establishing an escrow based on the project. But at this point, it was just an estimate to sort of say, here's what that projected cost is, and we can work that out once we go through the process.
yeah, I'd recommend an escrow, just township keeps it, every year we can pay the gentleman whatever 1/10 of whatever those dollars are.
Well, there's literally an indication for an additional cost for the work associated with the warranty. Presumably, he wouldn't be, if he didn't perform the warranty work, he wouldn't be paid for the warranty work. I guess that's the way I'm reading it. I think years 2 through 5, there's a $4,000 charge. Years 5 through 10, a $6,000 estimate in costs. So obviously, if the contractor didn't perform the warranty work, they wouldn't be paid. But as to whether or not they would then be responsible for a 10-year warranty on the road, I think in order for that road to last 10 years, there's estimated in this cost a fair amount of labor that'll occur each year to continue the life of that road. Any other discussion, board members? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. York to adopt the foregoing resolution number 4 for Cherry Lane, Church Street, Bakeman Street, and Mast Court improvements, Special Assessment District project as presented. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Witt? Yes. Mr. Verkest?
Yes, thank you, board. Next on the agenda is our items D1 and D2 regarding the St. Clair Haven Bridge replacements, commonly known as the Huron Point subdivision. And Mr. Witt, turn that over to you if you could, please.
For approximately a year, my office and the township has been working with the Huron Point Homeowners Association concerning a special assessment district for bridge replacement. Currently, the bridges are under reduced weight limits, and the county has been in the process of applying for grants to help to defray the cost of replacing the project. I know we've had several meetings with the residents to try and find a solution to move forward with the project. In conversations with the homeowners association, it was indicated that because the bridges were necessary, they had felt that the township should proceed with the project and establish a district for the replacement of those. And they had also discussed a road repaving project, but that's going to be a separate item later down the road, and it's not under consideration tonight. That's something they'd be looked at after the bridges are replaced. The bridge project as proposed consists of replacing the Archer Bridge, the North Lake Shore Bridge, the South Lake Shore Bridge, and the Pardee Bridge. The total project cost is $8.5 million, with $6,265,000 and change coming from federal grants, $1.132 million coming from the county, with the remaining portion coming from the remaining match is made up of $88,450 coming from the township, which we've already pledged for the Archer Bridge, with the remaining funds made up by the special assessment to pay for the match for the grant. Based on that, we prepared, working with the township engineer, we prepared estimates for the assessment district based on the way the subdivision is laid out. We levied the cost against parcels that were affected by different bridges, so that the properties that are bridge accessed but are north of the South Lake Shore Bridge would pay for the replacement cost within the Archer, the Pardee Bridge, and the North Lake Shore Bridge. The reason for that, and then everyone south of the South Lake Shore Bridge would cover the cost also for those three bridges, but exclusively for the South Lake Shore Bridge. For the people that are only north of the South Lake Shore Bridge, the estimate is $1,133 per home, and then it's an additional $1,423 for the parcels south of the South Lake Shore Bridge. I know there's been several conversations since the board packet's been put together about the way the assessment's done. Again, as we talked about earlier, we like these to be decisions of the residents and really look towards the residents for guidance on how these special assessments go forward.
Yep, so, of course, we had, as the clerk mentioned, some structural failures on the bridges that resulted in a reduced weight load. So at least an update. The Department of Roads hired an engineering firm to design temporary improvements, or basically structural reinforcements to the bridge, so that the weight limits could be raised to accept bus traffic, trash haulers, obviously emergency vehicles and so forth. They're working on those improvements, and the latest word that I'd received from the Department of Roads is that they expect to have the Lakeshore Bridge weight limits raised substantially by this Friday. So that would mean that bus traffic would be restored. In the meantime, they've kept the Archer span open for emergency vehicles, for trash trucks, so that basic services and safety response is available. We held a meeting, I believe it was last Wednesday, at the request of the Homeowners Association. The highway engineer was there, I was present, also tried to kind of update the residents about the whole process of what's going on in the bridges. And at that time, there was clearly a lot of interest. We had a question and answer session and a lot of input from the residents on how the special assessment district should be divided, as to whether or not it should be, for lack of a better word, a Zone A and a Zone B with two different assessments, or an assessment which is spread equally across the entire affected area. There was also some discussion as to whether or not the folks north of the North Lake Shore Bridge and the folks that reside on Venetian and possibly even South River should also be assessed, because they're all a part of the same homeowners association or district. The homeowners association is not deed restricted, so it is a voluntary membership. I don't know that that affects the whole issue, but there is specifically a defined subdivision, so that was one of the discussions. Because neither the homeowners association nor any particular individual, since the hearings were held, has come forward to request petitions and circulate petitions to say how the residents would like to be taxed, in essence. The board, we're faced with either doing nothing and losing the grant opportunity and not replacing the bridges, basically sort of playing chicken, which I think is irresponsible, or we're forced with implementing a special assessment district ourselves. And once we make that decision, if that's truly the decision this board wants to do, we then are faced with a decision of saying, should the assessment be split equally amongst every resident, or should there be different costs based on where you live within that subdivision? The clerk, in casual conversation around the office, we looked at it, said, well, you know, who's affected by this bridge, who's affected by that bridge? We came up with what I thought was a good idea. I think the clerk thought was a good idea. Certainly not everybody thinks it's a good idea, but that's what we brought forward in good faith, thinking this was the fairest way to do that assessment. It was put on our agenda last week. By Wednesday, residents were aware of it. Since then, I can assure you I've talked to lots of residents. I've exchanged lots of emails, phone calls, and I can honestly say that at this point, I've heard from a substantial number of people, both for and against our proposal, and a substantial number of people who say that it should be divided equally. I've heard from a small number of people who've suggested that the section of Lakeshore north of the North Lakeshore Bridge, literally that section of Lakeshore that you can access from South River without crossing the bridge, some folks have said they should be assessed. Some folks have said Venetian and South River should be assessed as well. I, for one board member, if the residents choose not to act, I do not see anything reasonable about imposing the cost on the north section of North Lakeshore, Venetian or South River. Now, certainly other board members can make motions and make suggestions however they might do, but for me personally, I don't think it's reasonable to ask someone to pay for a bridge that they don't need in order to get to and from their homes. Certainly there's other folks that may see it otherwise. Also, there's been some discussion about the Pardee Bridge and removal of the Pardee Bridge and the increase in access to the lake for a certain section of the canal. And prior to all of this, the township hired our engineer to do a study of the North Lakeshore Bridge to investigate what the cost and the impact would be to raise the North Lakeshore Bridge in anticipation of the fact that for many years, the Pardee Bridge has been a subject of great discussion as to whether or not it should remain or whether or not it should be removed. And certainly, I can understand the argument on either side for why some would like to keep it and why others would like to have it removed. But knowing that it's never been resolved up till now, a third option would be to raise the North Lakeshore Bridge to increase the navigable clearance so that the Pardee Bridge was no longer as much of a deterrent as it is. Again, I do not believe it's this board's responsibility to make the decision to raise the North Lakeshore Bridge because it isn't a necessity, but it certainly would be something that would have a positive impact on several property owners. But that kind of an action or decision needs to be driven by a petition. So while we might say, look, if we don't act and we don't get some sort of funding for the bridges, we're gonna lose the grant and we don't know when those bridges will be replaced. I think it's in the township's responsibility to say we need to move forward with an SAD. But as to whether or not we remove a bridge to improve somebody's canal access or raise a bridge to change that canal access, that's simply not a responsibility that the township is going to assume. Someone is gonna say, I prefer the Pardee Bridge to be removed, and I understand that. Others are gonna say, that affects my safety and I don't want you to remove it, and that's a problem. There's a long history of the county saying, well, the township has to assume liability. I was given some documentation by a supervisor in another township just today saying that the fire code requires that you should have 2 points of ingress and egress for any development. Well, clearly anyone beyond the South Lakeshore Bridge doesn't have that. But it's hard for us to say that we're gonna make a decision to remove a bridge that's gonna limit that accessibility. It's not a decision that we're really empowered to make. This is local control at its finest. If the residents want that bridge removed, they've gotta go through a process, but that responsibility can't fall on the township. Now, as to how we divide up the costs for the 4 bridges that we're talking about, clearly, as I say, there's 2 different groups. I think there's 306 homes that are serviced by the South Lakeshore Bridge, and there are additional 370 homes that are served by, that are basically lie between the North Lakeshore and Archer bridges and the South Lakeshore Bridge. That's a pretty even split, 306 to 370. So I had indicated at the meeting last Wednesday that I would be content in tabling this issue tonight so that we don't take action. The county road engineer said that he didn't need the SAD to be in place. They're moving forward with the construction with the understanding that the township in good faith is gonna move forward with some kind of an SAD. So at this point, on the agenda is a special assessment district and its adoption. I suggest to this board that number one, that we table this issue. And number two, we recently sent a letter to residents in the subdivision about traffic control and speeding. It's certainly not unrealistic for us to do a similar thing to explain to everybody the costs that are associated with the bridge, the two options for funding, and then ask everyone to return that letter in some clear format. For example, please return the letter with your name, your address. We'd like to receive one letter per address so that we don't say, well, I've got 4 people in my home versus one. So we'd literally say, if you've got an address, send us the letter back, sign it, and indicate whether you'd like it to be split evenly at $1,700 per person, or almost $1,800, or I like the 2-step method. Then we can, as a board of trustees, say, well, we've taken the time to poll the residents, pull back on the SAD, collect that information, and then move forward with that project. So at this point, that is the recommendation that I'm making for this board to take, the action for this board to take at this point.
Make a motion to table the item.
And is the board content with the concept of sending out a letter to residents? Would you include that in your motion?
Oh, yeah, and send out a letter, I mean, whatever.
Okay,
I'll support that.
all right.
I mean,
In
you can,
essence,
you can
yes.
always send out information, I don't know that you need a motion for that.
No, I understand, but I'd rather have it as a board action as opposed to going rogue and sending out a letter here. The point is that the question really that I'm looking for is, does this board want that public input before they make the decision? And it sounds
Well,
like.
obviously, we
yeah.
want the public input. I
Sure.
mean,
And
Yeah, we will, yeah, and I might have mentioned it earlier, and I'm not sure when everyone arrived. We left this on the agenda because had we removed it from the agenda, there is no opportunity for public comment. But by making a motion to table, we're literally acting. We'll open up the floor for public comment, and anyone who wishes to comment on the subject of these bridges is welcome to do so.
And just to follow up, we had spoken with the township attorney regarding the discretion that we have in levying the assessment against properties, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Huth, I don't want to misquote you, but the gist of it is that we have broad authority as to what the assessment is, as long as we can show that the properties are receiving a value that's receiving some value for that work done.
That's correct. The standard would be met by either one of the proposals you have for assessing the cost for the bridges.
Right, so we're not looking at a legal challenge at this point. If we were to go with 2 districts or 1 unified district with an even division, both would seem to withstand the test.
Well, you can always look at a legal challenge, but not a likely to succeed legal challenge. How
Fair
about
enough.
that?
Yep, and that's what we're getting at, so
They
that's a
might
good
even
point.
wanna do a workshop or something not even a workshop, but an
Yes,
information.
let the record show that Mr.
I
York.
did not say workshop, I did not say workshop, but information meeting.
Okay,
I'll support that, Mr.
all right, so we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by
guys are
Mr. Tominello to table items D1 and D2, in essence, to table the establishment of the special assessment district to a future meeting, and through a mailing, first-class mailing, poll the residents in some reasonable, organized, and fair fashion to see what the will of the residents in this district are.
And, we might want to add a little technology to it and put something on the website, so if we send the letter, we'll put a link in there, so we say, hey, just save somebody a stamp.
Well, I think the idea, what I would say is whether it's by mail or whether it's by email.
Right, we'll give people some options.
Right, we want a specific name and an address and a response for option A or option B. An email is fine, but you want to be able to print out an email, because at some point when someone says, well, I think this is unfair, we want to be able to say, well, here's the addresses and here are their responses, whether it's through snail mail, whether someone drops it off, or whether they send us an email. So, good point. We discussed it a fair amount, so we'll open.
I do have a question, though. What is the population in the mailing you're going to be hitting?
It would be the 676
Okay,
affected.
so it's not gonna be everyone in the subdivision, 'cause I heard you say that some residents feel it should be spread across everyone in the subdivision.
Right, so there were, what I would deem, based on my own informal, survey, so to speak, based on conversation with residents, emails and so forth, there were a number of people who said that people north of the North Lake Shore, people on Venetian, and possibly even people on South River Road are a part of the subdivision, and therefore they should be assessed. My point is this: if residents want to circulate a petition to that effect, that's fine. But my feeling is, and I've said this to some residents, if we have approximately 100 homes from South River to the North Lake Shore Bridge, if I were to ask 676 people if you'd like them to share, and I ask 100 people how they feel, I don't know that that's really a
I
fair
just
split.
want to make sure that,
Right.
that.
So at this
those
point,
will be
it would go
included.
to 676 affected, basically the role.
I agree with
The
that.
special assessment role. And there's others, I'm sure, that might disagree, but if we're gonna act, and that's what I believe is fair, so that's the action I'm willing to take.
Right. So, and just to make it clear that, because some residents do feel that everyone should be included, which you said, and you can reiterate as well, the petition can be started, and if that's, in fact the case, that can be presented to the board as well.
Right, if we were to find that a majority of residents within a district, and that district can be defined various ways, if a majority of the residents in that district sign a petition saying they want their assessment to occur in a certain way, which is ultimately what I'd really prefer. I would rather have a group of people come together and say, this is how we want to participate. Similar to the last agenda item. Those folks came forward. It's not for me to tell them whether they should have concrete or asphalt. You decide what you want, you figure out what the costs are, you sign up, and when a majority of you agree to it, then that's what you get. That's, as I say, that's local control at its very finest. But I have no problem with this process either. So we'll open up the floor for public comment. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Everybody gets one opportunity to speak. If you'd like to speak and there's someone at the podium, we encourage you to come to the on-deck chair so that we're not waiting, 30 seconds or a minute between each speaker, and then everybody has a chance to speak in a timely manner. So we'll open up the floor now.
Great, thank you. Kendra Zadonia. I'm a HPHA trustee, and as evidenced by last week's meeting that we had in the neighborhood, we finally got everyone's attention. In previous meetings, we didn't have such good participation, so I think that we can probably move pretty quickly with this. So we are requesting that the township do put out a mailer with 2 options. And my personal opinion on the 2 options, based on what I've heard from lots of other residents in the neighborhood, are 1 by usage and 2 even Steven. We didn't know before if we could do that. Sounds like we can do that legally. So I think that's a good thing to put out there as the second option. One thing to consider on the first option, which is by use, the houses that are south of the South Lake Shore Bridge, they will not be using all of the bridges 100% of the time, but we are paying for 100% of the cost. So can we look at some sort of an allocation for those homes that are south of South Lake Shore, whether it be 50-50 or 20 or 60-40 or whatever, some sort of an allocation to make it a little bit fair, because we're not going to drive over every single bridge 100% of the time. Okay. And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up, it's great that the fix is going in for the first Lakeshore Bridge. That's wonderful news, so thank you for that. Was wondering if we could put at the bottom of the letter, I don't know if this is going to remain 1 lane or not, but if it is going to remain 1 lane, can we put at the bottom of the letter a vote for putting a stoplight or not there? Because that was another hot topic last week that we discussed. So a lot of residents thought that that would be a safer option, because you literally can't see over the bridge to see the other car that might be coming from an oncoming traffic standpoint. So that's it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Scott Burgess, and I just had 2 thoughts. One was to echo her idea that people south of the South Lake Bridge, I can't tell you the last time I went over Archer or Pardee, years. And So, but we're getting charged for all 4 bridges down in that area, so some type of rethinking that method. And I like the idea of the votes going out. I think it should be maybe a little bit more formal than a letter, you know. And I also do believe that there's more than 2 options. There's remove the Pardee Bridge, there's raise the North Lake Shore Bridge, there's reassess how the money is levied, the fees are levied, and I think there should be, you know, a number of different options on a fairly formal ballot, so it's pretty clear what you're voting for. That's all I have.
Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm Bert Silich. I live on West Archer Drive. I liked the discussion last week, and I appreciate you continuing this conversation here. I'd like to offer as more of a solution here. I think we're being a little bit restrictive in how we look at how we're going to make the assessment. We tend to look at this as, and you talked last week that we had like 4 or 5 different options, and you chose one. And I understand you have to pick one. But the reality is we don't have to pick one option. And that, like you said last week, all those options that you discussed, they all have some merits. They all have some good points. You know, some of the families liked them, some didn't, but they all have some disadvantages. And I think I did point out last week that the one that the board chose is the weakest of the options you discussed. And I would hope that the obvious example would be if there's 2 houses at the last bridge, we don't make the 2 houses pay for an entire bridge. I mean, and that's what in essence you're doing by invoking what you did in good faith. And but that's why that's a weak option. But without any clear, perfect option, which there isn't, what I would offer is, and the reason I have a little expertise in this, or I've published articles on how to combine many different factors. And what I would offer to the board and to the township to think about is, if you have 4 or 5 different options that all are reasonable, use them all. You can combine all of those options into one factor. That way you're not leaning too much against, you know, I'm the last house on the bridge, I'm paying it all. But if you have 4 or 5 different options, and personally I would limit it to 4 in general, but you can take, it's not rocket science either. It's, the theory behind this is complicated, but it ends up being adding numbers and averaging. That's all it is. But if you have 4 or 5 different good ways of paying them, how you reduce the disadvantage of how many bridges you cross is by you balance it with another option that is also reasonable. But in essence, let's say you had 2 options, and to me the 2 obvious ones in my mind are, if there's 800 homes, they pay 1/800 for the cost. That's, you know. But then people argue, well, wait a minute, you know, I've got an expensive house, and you know, we pay taxes on a differential. You know, so property value to me seems like a reasonable way of doing this, because that's how we're taxed. But you don't have to do one or the other, is what I'm saying. You could actually do both. If you want to do how many bridges you cross, you can throw that into a 3rd factor. And I just want to give a quick example with 2, because I think it's important to understand this. If there's 100, let's continue with 100 homes. That's our example. So there's 100 homes in the entire community. Each home would pay 1%. That's kind of the democratic way. But you know, let's say the other group doesn't want to do this. I want to go by property value. And maybe one home has a 1% of the entire property value, and another home is 1.4% of the entire property value. You combine them. You're a 1% homeowner, that's your vested interest in this community, and your 1% property value, 1 + 1 is 2, you divide by 2, you stay at 1%. If you're a 1% vested homeowner and your property is the biggest house on the block and it's 1.4%, 1 + 1.4 is 2.4, divided by 2, it's 1.2%. So there is a differential paid, but it doesn't favor any one particular method. And if there were one perfect method, I'd say, yeah, select the one method and go with it. But clearly, all the methods have some advantages and disadvantages. So use them all. Just decide how many you want to use. You know, you could use those 2. You can throw in, again, how many bridges you cross. And I would do it a little more complicated for me than what you're doing. It's not about bridges. It's about it's about traffic flow. It's not that hard, but I think the board needs to learn how to determine how much wear and tear a house puts on a bridge. And I don't mean by engineering assessment, but it's more about usage. So it's not just about how many bridges you cross. You need to take the formula one step higher than that. But the point is, if you have 4 or 5 different ways of doing it, just use them all and combine them. This way, if a homeowner they're not relying on one assessment. If on one assessment you're at 1%, another assessment you're at the worst case is 1.8%, what you're actually going to pay is somewhere between the worst solution and the best solution for you. It'll be some average in between there. But you're also taking into several different factors into account simultaneously. So it just has the board to get a little bit more complicated in how they do it. It doesn't have to be, we have to vote on one and stick with one. You can use several simultaneously.
Thank you.
You should call him and get his expertise.
Good evening. Mark Jurek, 37650 Lakeshore Drive. I've been listening to the discussion going back and forth, and frankly, the people on Venetian that don't cross bridges maybe shouldn't be included. But the one thing that's being missed here is bridges have 2 purposes. One is to go over something, and one is to go under something. The people that are behind the bridges, they want to go under there with their boats all the time, but they don't want to pay for the bridge. That's not fair. It's one price, everybody pays the same. The bridge is used. I need the bridge to get to my house, that's it. I have a right to access to my property. I don't need the bridges for my boat. If you want to be cost conscientious, we'll just make the bridges flat, put culverts in, we keep the water flow going on, and it's cheap for everybody. But everybody uses those bridges, whether you drive over them or under them. Everybody in the neighborhood uses them. One pays, all pay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Stacy Burgess. I live on Lakeville. I have 3 things. I disagree with the traffic light in the interim while the bridges are being constructed on. I don't know if they're going to be 2 lanes afterwards. I don't know if you can clarify that in the letter that's going to go out with the MDOT. Because people have road rage in the morning. I'm taking my children to the bus stop, and let me tell you, I've never seen so many cars in and out, or actually out of Lakeshore. I've been in the community now only a few years, and it's crazy. You know, safety of our children, you know, with the road rage, I totally disagree. But what you could do, and the suggestion is, move the stop sign up, because I stop at that stop sign, and then I creep up so I can see over. So a solution would be move the stop signs up a little bit. Second is, obviously I live North Lake Shore. If I'm going to pay for all 4 bridges, the people south of me, I don't want them on my bridge that I'm paying for. Absolutely not. People ride their bikes, people rollerblade, people, you know, go house hunting. And I think it should be divided evenly. I had a third thing, but I lost my train of thought, so that's it.
Well, if you think of it, you can come on back up. You spared a minute.
Good evening, Board. My name is Jan Jorgensen. I live on Lake Shore. And I just had a couple of comments. The first thing is, I'm not happy with the way that the assessment is being, the formula in which it's being assessed. And my question is that you are given the authority to do this under Public Act 188. And when I look at Public Act 188, it's very specific on how you can do it and how it should be done. It speaks to, well, I should say it speaks to roads, but it never speaks to bridges. So my question, I guess, to the attorney is, Public Act 188, the proper act in which this is being used to create that district. And again, I guess I just want to go on record to say that I think it should be split evenly amongst all the property owners in the subdivision. Thanks.
Thank you.
Evening, board members. Mike Barnhart, 38995 Lakeshore. The first item I would ask is the board members please include removal of the party bridge. You spoke of the will of the people, and if the removal of the party bridge is in there and you get 51% of the people to say they want it gone, then it's not the township's liability, and at least we have that to go back on in case somebody comes after the township. Secondly, I would ask that it also goes to the Venetian people. We're assuming that they don't want it. or it's no value to them, or the people north of the North Lake Shore Bridge. But if that bridge is gone, and we spoke about value, and Mr. Hu said that there has to be a value, we don't access that bridge, but like somebody else said earlier about going under the bridge. If we raise that North Lake Shore Bridge as high as possible without doing all the engineering costs, and we get even an extra foot out of it, and the Party Bridge is removed, that certainly adds value to everybody on Venetian with smaller boats, jet skis, and also everybody on the North Lake Shore. Now, you could argue on the lake side, absolutely, maybe they're not included, but you could include Venetian and everybody on the canal side of North Lake Shore, and that certainly decreases the cost for everybody. I mean, once we're added into that, we're talking 65 homes on North Lake Shore plus all of Venetian. We're literally looking at a cost of probably less than $1,200 per resident out there in that area. And over 10 years, it's $120 plus 5%, so thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Bird and I live on North Lake Shore. I'm a proponent of taking out the Party Bridge as well. A couple of points. As far as the safety issue goes, I understand there's some concern on that. But the people who live south of the South Lake Shore Bridge only have one ingress and egress. In fact, the whole subdivision only has one ingress and egress. So I have no problem if it's going to be split evenly, even though I'm on North Lake Shore. It would be nice if we got something out of it by removing the Party Bridge. I know it's a grant, but I'm still looking at the price of it is $1.7 million from what the documents that I've seen. Okay, maybe that's not, if it's split evenly and the cost is roughly the same even with the removal, and I understand the grant wouldn't apply to that, it would certainly be a lot less money. So Macomb County funds, the Michigan funds, the federal funds, that's not free money. That's still taxpayers' money. We're gonna spend $1.7 million to reconstruct a bridge that the only issue I could see is some residents have issue of safety. That's not the only way in and out. The other residents who live south of South Lake Shore and the whole entire community, that subdivision, only has one way in and out. So we're gonna spend $1.7 million to reconstruct a bridge so some residents can have added sense of security. Hey, I understand that, but it's still $1.7 million of taxpayer money. I'm paying money to the Macomb, I'm paying money to the state, I'm paying money to the feds. It's not free money. I'm advocating, if you wanna split it all over, then take out the Party Bridge, replace the 3 bridges. Sometime again in the future, that bridge is gonna need to be replaced again. They've been talking about this since 1999, at least, to take out that bridge. So I'm an advocate of taking out the bridge. If you wanna split it the whole way, I'm for that. If you don't wanna do that, then that's a different issue as far as the way my vote goes. As far as needing the bridge to get to your home, okay, that's fine. My response to the gentleman would be, if that bridge wasn't there to get to your home, I'd have no problem getting under it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Tina Hayes, and I live on Lakeville. I do also agree with splitting everything evenly. I think it's a benefit for the community. I also